Hi guys, and welcome back to Bookhaven with me, Kim. Today I will be doing a December wrap-up and mini sort of rapid-fire ratings of the books I've completed in December, so stick around! So I'll be reviewing 2 middle grade books that I read, 2 YA, and 2 audiobooks, which I believe were adult fantasy. So we'll start off with the middle grade. First, I read Bob by Wendy Mass, Rebecca Stead, and illustrated by Nicholas Gannon. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. This is a book about our main character, Livy, who goes back to Australia to visit her grandmother's farm and visit her grandmother, of course. And when she gets into her old room, she realizes that there's something in the closet. And this is our character, Bob, who is Livy's quote-unquote imaginary friend who's not so imaginary. And he's been waiting there for 5 years for Livy to come back and help him figure out what he is and who he is. This is a really wholesome story. It's very short. As you can see, the font is fairly large and easy to read, so I'd recommend it for anywhere from 3rd grade and above, depending on the level of reading. And it has some really fun illustrations in the book. As an example, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm sure any child would. The only place where I took away points was, for me, I wish the environment, the grandmother's farm had been fleshed out a little bit more, but I believe the author made the choice, or the authors made the choice not to do that because they wanted to keep it more easily readable and short, probably for the targeted audience. And I would have liked to have known a little bit more about the other children that Livy knew in this story, but again, I think it was just the author keeping it to a certain length. My favorite thing about the story was the relationship between Livy and Bob, and how there was a bit of a fairy tale aspect to the story. I highly recommend this book. If I was to say like it or leave it, I would definitely say like it. Next, I have the second book to Nevermore, which I believe could be a trilogy. This is Wondersmith, The Calling of Morgan Crowe by Jessica Townsend. And the first book, Nevermore, is about Morgan Crowe, who's born in Eventide, which is a very unlucky day. And everyone blames Morgan for their problems until Jupiter North comes and takes her away to Nevermore and introduces her to this fantastical world. And Morgan goes through some trials to try and make it into the Wonder Society, where everyone has a certain knack or talent to bring, magical or not. And she is accepted, but under certain circumstances, because you find out in the second book that she is a wondersmith, which is someone with a lot of power who people are typically afraid of and consider evil. Now, this book is about Morgan starting up in the Wonder Society and going through training and all the things that happen. And I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It took me a while to get into. I found the first part of the book was pretty slow moving, but I'm really glad I didn't give up, and it ended up being my favorite so far of the 2 books. My favorite aspect of this book was actually seeing a little bit more of Nevermore itself and the different festivals and things they celebrate. And of course, seeing the DeLuca in the hotel where Morgan lives with Jupiter North, and reading about all their mischievous parties and things that the patrons there end up doing. If I was to say like it or leave it, definitely love it. This was my favorite book, like I said, out of the 2, and I can't wait for the next one to come out. Next, I've got a book that I didn't really know if this was considered YA or middle grade, but I'm gonna guess YA because there's some more serious content in it, and that is The Riverman by Aaron Starmer. I believe this is a trilogy. This is the first book. If I was to say like it or leave it, this is like it. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, pushing more on 4.5 out of 5 stars, if I could rate it that way on Goodreads. This is a book about a kid named Alistair. He's in middle grade. He is just an all-around good guy. A good friend, parents love him, his friends love him. He's, just not your troublesome kind of kid. And when Alistair's classmate and neighbor Fiona Loomis comes to him one day out of the blue and asks him to write her life story, he is completely shocked and doesn't really know why. And the story is about how Fiona tells him about her life bit by bit and reveals this grand story, and Alistair can't figure out if this story is really covering up something more sinister that has happened to Fiona, and he's worried about her and whether he should ask for help or try and find help for Fiona. And this was the part about the book that really kept me intrigued. I would say almost 3/4 the way through, I still didn't know where it was going, if this was going to be a book about mental health or fantasy. It really reminded me of one of my favorite movies from 2005 called Never Was. Not exactly in the same story, but just the whole idea and how it keeps you thinking and wondering in what direction it's going to take you. I really love the characters. I really love Fiona, even though she was a little bit quirky, a little bit strange, and some of the other characters and friendships that Alistair had were also interesting to see how they developed, and there was a twist at the end that I really didn't see coming. I ended up buying the second book, The Whisper, right after I finished this. I happened to find it for a couple dollars on Book Outlet, so I was very happy about that, and I'm really looking forward to diving right into it. Then I completed the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. This is The Queen of Shadows, and I gave this book a 4 to 5 stars, which I seem to have given most of the books in the Throne of Glass series. I've enjoyed them, mostly except for the 3rd book in the series, I believe. This one, again, was enjoyable. I did feel that certain parts were, I don't know if they felt rushed, or I was just really disappointed at the end at what the author chose to do with the main character, but I am going to continue on. I do have the next book in the series, but I'm not going to try and get through it right now. I'll probably pick it up starting in January. I really loved in this book how some of the relationships that were developing really just gave me all the feels, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but some of the bad guys warmed up a bit, and you got to see a bit of their softer side. If I was to say like it or leave it, I would give this one a like it. Next is a novella called Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, and this I gave 3 out of 5 stars. This is a short novella. It's sci-fi, and I really don't have a lot to say about it, good or bad. It didn't really draw me in. There was quite a bit of violence in it, and I don't know, maybe I'm just not, it really takes a very specific sci-fi story to bring me in. It's not one of the genres I tend to read a lot about, but a lot of people love it. I thought it was so-so. I'm not going to continue this series, and like it or leave it, I would say leave it for this one. And the last audiobook I'm going to talk about is called Kingdoms and Chaos by Kel Cade. Now this is book number 4 in a series called King's Dark Tidings, which I've really enjoyed up until now. The first 3 books, I believe I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I love them. But book number 4, 2 out of 5 stars. I was just really not happy near the end of this book. I mean, it still had some of the great storytelling, and this story is about Rezkin, a man that some call part demon, that doesn't really have a lot of the humanity that most other people have, and he's been fighting a war against evil on 2 fronts. And he has a cast of characters that have been with him from the beginning, and some new ones thrown in there each story. But this one just sort of went against everything I thought I knew about him. Here comes the spoilers. There's a part in the book where Rezkin ends up getting married, and he has to consummate this marriage. And he does that and goes through with it with barely a bat of an eye. And it freaked me out because up until then, it just goes against everything you know about him and everything he feels comfortable with and knows and how he acts. And it just, I don't know, threw me for a loop. And throughout the story, I just felt that everything happened a little bit too easily. Things were just falling into place. Although the story was still enjoyable, at the very end, when another one of the characters, Frisha, who was being courted by Rezkin, after breaking up with him, she suddenly develops a love interest with another one of the characters just out of the blue, and it just felt thrown in, and I really, really didn't enjoy where the author started taking the story at that point. Will I continue the series? I don't know. At this point, we'll see. I really love the narrator, Nick Podell. Maybe when it comes out, I'll pick it up and see if it gets any better, but I'm a little let down and just felt that this book fell apart for me. And maybe it was just my expectations, but like it or leave it, I would say leave it. If you like what we've talked about, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you happen to have read any of these books or listened to the audiobooks, I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you might have rated them. Until then, keep reading, and I'll see you next time.